Welcome back to another Senators panel. I'm Bruce Garriock. As the Senators enter their final stage of training camp, the season opener set for October 2nd against the Toronto Maple Leafs at Scotiabank Arena. I'm joined by Steve Warren of the Steve Warren Project podcast today. And Steve, there's a lot to discuss about the Senators as they enter this final phase of training camp. But one of the biggest news stories in the last 10 days is the signing of Thomas Chabot to an 8-year, $64 million deal. I think it's a deal that people didn't believe was going to get done.
100%, and I think it is such a big win, like a Game 7 win for this organization, both from a hockey perspective and a marketing perspective. When you look at Thomas Chabot, that was the guy that everybody was talking about. Like, am I really going to buy into this rebuild? And I think that was where people's headspace was. And when Chabot finally signs, I think people saw the Colin White signing and they said, okay, there's a glimmer of hope there that maybe this whole rebuild is for real. But when they finally got Thomas Chabot done, then I think fans went, okay, that's showing me really something. That's a great sign. So from a marketing standpoint, it was absolutely huge to get that done. From a hockey perspective, that is a steal. 8x8. That's a guy that's already a top 10 guy in defensive scoring in the NHL. That was from last season. Nowhere to go but up from here.
Well, and what's interesting to me and what I think is a real win for the organization is, number one, they wanted to do something for credibility in the region. And the other thing is, they were able to get this done without signing bonus. And there's been a lot of discussion about signing bonus, and a lot of the deals have contained heavy front end signing bonuses. In my discussion with Chabot's agent Ian Pulver, he basically said the Senators didn't want to go down that road. And they did, and they were okay with not going down that road because, in the end, they feel that when Chabot is a good player, he's going to be rewarded for that in the final years of this contract.
Yeah, and I think
not that he's not a good player now, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's look at the worst case scenario because every deal this length carries some level of risk, right? It's an 8-year contract, $8 million. It's a lot of dough. It's a lot of term. But I think the worst case scenario for this guy would be a really good top 4 defenseman, and that's only a slight overpayment. Like, you look 3-4 years into this deal, an 8-year contract, you'll be looking at that and say, you know what, that's probably not that far off what a good top 4 defenseman will be. I think, though, that he's going to be an elite defenseman, and I think it's just a slam dunk. I think it's going to be an absolute steal when we look at this deal back, 20 years from now.
And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss the possibility of Thomas Chabot being a captain here. I think when it comes down to it, it's going to come down to him or Brady Tkachuk in the end.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And you know what? The signing of Thomas Chabot and Colin White, I mean, that plays well for Brady Tkachuk and getting him signed next year.
Yeah.
So there's that little, they're all friends, they all talk, and so that bodes well. The captaincy, absolutely. It's got to be one of those guys. I kind of think it'll be Brady Tkachuk, but that's personal preference. That'll come down to what DJ Smith likes best. And I always get the idea that DJ Smith, as a player, he was a really robust defenseman who liked a kind of a physical style, and that's why I think Brady Tkachuk will eventually win the day in that two-man battle.
And one of the changes we've seen in this training camp is Nikita Zaitsev, acquired from the Leafs on July 1, playing with Thomas Chabot. And I wonder how you feel that's working out. I think Nikita Zaitsev is a good defensive defenseman. He played a lot with Morgan Rielly in Toronto. He's going to play a similar role here.
Yeah, I don't know that that's the pairing that they'll go with because you really want a true shutdown defenseman playing with Thomas Chabot, ideally to allow him to freewheel. I haven't decided what I think Zaitsev is yet, but I do think that he's a big upgrade on Cody Ceci, in my opinion. I think he's more poised with the puck. I've liked what I've seen so far. It's a small sample size at this stage, but I'm not really seeing yet why he got so much grief from the Leaf fan base, the Leaf media. I already like that deal, and so I think that's step one. Try this as an experiment, and obviously DJ Smith knows this player very well, and I think that's why he's an Ottawa Senator today on DJ Smith's advice, and we'll see if he's right.
One of the guys that we've talked a lot about in this training camp is Logan Brown. And Logan Brown is in a situation where it's not a now or never situation, and it won't be. But I think when you look at what Logan Brown is in right now, people want potential to meet production with this guy. And are we in that situation with Logan Brown?
Well, I think, you're at a stage now where this guy's in his 4th training camp. Like, he's been around a while. He's a 2016 first rounder. Every first rounder will come with that massive expectation. He's got the pedigree, the bloodlines, his dad, Jeff Brown. There's expectations, and has been since he was drafted, that he's going to be a guy that contributes offensively. I think we're at a stage now where we've got to see him make the NHL and start contributing. The speed, though, is the big issue. He's actually not that. He's like Colin Greening. Remember how he used to skate? He was one of the fastest guys on the team, but not really quick, like those first 2-3 steps. But when he got going, man, he could go. And I think Logan Brown is the same kind of fast. But the game is so much about quickness, and I think that's a deficit for him right now. And I'd like to see him get more engaged, more involved, and but he's got to make the team first, and then we'll see how it goes from there.
Well, and I think if you look at the situation that the Senators are in with Logan Brown, they want him to make the team. I know they have 4 centers signed right now, but I think they're quite willing to find a spot for Logan Brown if he reaches up and grabs it. And obviously in the last week of the preseason, he's got to do that if he's going to be on the opening night roster when it's due October 1st at 5 p.m. There's a lot of I look at Logan Brown and say, there's a spot there for him. He's got to get it. The guys who surprised me going down early, though, were Alex Formenton and Max Lajoie to some extent.
I would agree, based on what everybody expected. You know, Lajoie played over 50 games in the NHL last year. That would think you get you a leg up. And at the very least, if either of these guys were going to be sent down, you'd think it would be maybe closer to the end of camp, not with 31 guys still on the roster when they ended up going down to Belleville. But it's no harm, no foul. Go down, develop further. This is a case of, and it's a good problem to have when you finally, and you've been around as long as I have covering this team, Bruce, like this might be the most stocked the prospect cupboard has ever been. And this is a byproduct of that really good players and names of interest are going to get sent down to the minors versus, you know, plugger A, plugger B, guy you never heard of going down. That's the nature of a very full cupboard, that these cuts are going to be interesting as they come along. They're going to be named guys.
Before we wrap this up, I just want to talk a little bit about the impact that DJ Smith has made on this team. You know, he was hired as the head coach in May. There's been an awful lot of talk between now and then. He's brought in a whole new staff. He's got 2 former head coaches on his staff in Davis Payne and Jack Capuano. He's got Bob Jones, a guy with a lot of OHL experience with him. You look at the situation that DJ Smith is in. What kind of impact do you think he has made in his first, I guess, 3 weeks on the job for real?
I feel like, and it's always about comparing to what was here before, I feel like the players and the coaching staff, there feels like there's more lines of communication open between them. I think that's one of his great strengths so far. I mean, you really won't know. The proof is in the pudding, and it's still so early. It's just training camp. We'll see as the season goes on, but I understand why the Ottawa Senators were impressed with this guy, even though he's got no NHL head coaching body of work. There's a lot to like there. He is a former player. He understands how to talk to the players and brings a defensive component that was missing. I mean, there wasn't a single former defenseman on that former Sens coaching staff. And what have we said for the last 2-3 years? That in their own zone, it was a bit of a disaster. So, you know, right now, I think everything that he can do, he's done. And it's hard not to be totally impressed. And again, I get fully why the Sens were impressed with him, but it's hard to make any judgments until we see what this team looks like in the regular season.
Well, one of the things that DJ Smith has talked about is the pace of training camp, and the pace of this has gone by pretty quick. We'll be back next week, the Senators panel. I thank Steve Warren from the Steve Warren Project podcast for joining us today. For Post Media, I'm Bruce Garriott.